All right, can I do an entire episode with a dog in my hand? Probably not. Hey everybody, I'm Ken Napzok. Welcome to another edition of the Blathering Mailbag. This is where I stand outside in nature. Animals interrupt me while I try to answer a question submitted to us from our blathering community. And yes, it's not quite cool enough to have a beanie on, but I committed to this and we're here. Today's question comes to us from James Holmes out in the UK. James writes, "Hello there. This is going to be a mess of a question, so please ignore it if it doesn't make sense." Too late, James. We're here and I can't turn back. Just like the beanie. I've gone down the politics rabbit hole on both sides of the pond. Listened to Novara Media and other UK stuff, which won't have made it over there, so don't mention it. Breaking Points, Secular Talk, Majority Report, and others. I'm a political junkie. In the UK, we're following the fascist pipeline, so I need to do something, right? I've never been on a protest, never knocked on doors. Apart from trying to sell TV subscriptions, people would say no. I'd say, wow, move on. Not a great success rate. And I know my prognosis is right. Don't blame immigrants, trans people. They're people. How can some folks not see that? Trade unions, etc. Blame corporations, billionaires, bot politicians, and basically the Epstein class, but I generally don't know how to argue serious stuff. I will happily argue why The Last Jedi is genuinely one of my favorite films, but when there are real stakes, my default of making fun of everything doesn't cut it. Any tips on winning hearts and minds? Me saying, well, we both appear to be human, so maybe keeping human rights is a good thing, doesn't seem to cut it. Free Palestine. That was a journey, James. A big question. A wild adventure of a question. I feel like Gandalf and Bilbo just left Hobbiton to go save the world. I want to focus on what I think is the heart of your question, which is this fly is around me. I want to focus on the heart of your question, which is the idea of how can I win hearts and minds? And I think the way to look at it is, how can you change hearts and minds? And more importantly, is that the goal? Look, if you have listened to me for any length of time, you know where I stand on a lot of social issues and political issues. Lefty, liberal, progressive, quasi-progressive, Democrat, over there. Whatever you want to call me. But I wasn't always like that. I was raised in a small, suburban, Central Coast, California town. I was raised in a certain way, and I'm not here to say this isn't a video where I'm saying that is wrong and where I am now is right. I definitely have a belief that I'm on a better path, but that's just how I was raised. I was a white Christian suburban kid in a Reagan Republican house, and I carried that with me. And I'm not that anymore. And I've changed. And it did not happen overnight. And I think that's my big point here. There wasn't one great debate, shouting match, social media argument, YouTube comment, anything. There wasn't one moment where I went, oh, I see things differently now. The change that happened in me happened over a long length of time because I was allowed to change by the people around me. Oh, it doesn't mean that there weren't arguments and tense moments. It doesn't mean that we all agree on things even when you move to one side. There's a lot of that little nuance in the world that we got to deal with. I also feel I accidentally went into a weird Randy Quaid, Ronald Reagan impersonation from 1985 SNL. Let's move on. That's how I became who I am today, and I'm still growing. I'm still moving forward. I was allowed to get there. And that raises the bigger question of what is our goal? I go on podcasts and shows here on this channel, on Anytime with Ken and Alden, Force Center and other places, and I do a fair amount of yelling and screaming. Why? Because the world makes me want to yell and scream. There is an absolute lot going on, and it's hard to process. But this isn't about that today, and I don't want to go down the middle, and I don't want to both sides things. You will not push me off my ideas that trans rights are human rights, or that there's a genocide in Gaza, or that fascism has found its way to our shores and authoritarianism is in place. All those things are things that I absolutely believe in. But if you're still with me, to your question, James, how do we change these hearts and minds? And again, I'm using the word change, not necessarily win. I don't fault you for using that, but that's kind of this zero-sum game that we all kind of live in and are forced to operate in, right? I'm talking about change. I go on all these shows and I scream and I yell with the best of them. And I have jokes, and I think humor is very effective on the pathway to change as well. But in my regular life, and there's people in my life who I have distanced myself from, there's people in my life who I have cut off, and I think that sometimes that's the best way. But there's some times where you can't, or even better, there's sometimes where you just don't want to. You have years of experience with these people, years of memories, and you love them and they love you. But all this stuff has kind of exploded in the world over the last 10 years, and it's truly divided us. I'm not going to back off on my beliefs, though. And if that's the dividing line, that's the dividing line. But I always ask myself in those situations, what is the point of the conversations I'm trying to have with them? Is it to win or is it to change? And then, again, how do you change them? And I just think it is about being understood and maybe letting them try to explain themselves as well. But again, this isn't a big tent conversation. This isn't a reaching across the aisle conversation. This is a conversation about those personal connections we all have, whether it's a coworker, family member, friend, and these disagreements come up. What do you do? And I ask again, what's the point? I ask this of my colleagues a lot. It's one thing to go scream on a podcast, but it's another thing to be out in the world and trying to function while also trying to maybe affect the people around you. Is our goal just to win at the ballot box? Is our goal just to put in politicians that more align with our policies? Well, if that's it, how do we do it? We get more people to vote for them. And I do think there's some truth to just saying, hey, we as a party, no matter what party you're part of, we as a party are going to stand by our core beliefs. We're not going to push off on them. We're not going to compromise. This is who we are, and that will ignite our voter base. I actually think that's an effective strategy, but I'm not a political science major. I haven't run campaigns. I'm an adult male in a beanie in what used to be the fall, but is now just a longer summer. Go to other smarter people for that. I'm talking about what is our goal on a day-to-day basis? What is our goal when you have those people in your life that you absolutely want to stay connected with, and you absolutely want to see them go on their own change journey? I, over the course of many years, was allowed to go on that journey, and I was allowed to go on it one moment at a time, one experience at a time. One of the big moments for me was in the early aughts, the 2008 era, where gay marriage was on the ballot. And because of how I was raised, because of how I thought I had to believe to keep in line with that, because that's what I was expecting myself to just go into that ballot box and not vote for the queer community to have the right to get married. That's who I was at the time. But by the time I got into that voting booth, and back then I actually did go to the voting booth. Now I'm mail-in, and I'm going to stay mail-in as long as I possibly can until some National Guardsman comes to my door and says I can't, which might happen soon. Stand by. But by the time I got into that voting booth, I voted for the queer community to have the right to get married. So what happened? How did I change? Well, it was the people around me who were part of the queer community who allowed me to be who I was while staunchly and decidedly being who they were. I worked with them. I laughed with them. I dined with them. I cried with them. I grew with them. So when I went into that booth to vote, I didn't vote for a policy. I voted for the people. I voted for the names and the faces of those in my life. They changed me. Later on, there were some high-profile mass shootings, mostly of the school variety. And I was a person who was around guns, who worked in a different industry at the time, and had a lot of gun owners around me, had a lot of law enforcement around me. And I'm not someone who gets nervous around guns. I've shot them. I've never owned them. I'd call myself a defender of the Second Amendment. And even to this day, I'm okay with that existing. But this isn't a gun control conversation. This is a conversation about change. And when those incidents were happening, I started to question the stubborn defense of the Second Amendment, of the right to bear arms. I thought, man, isn't there another way to look at this? Because the stuff that's happening out there doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel like something that should continue. And quite frankly, the people around me at the time, friends of mine, coworkers of mine, all had this very, very stubborn approach to it. Absolutely not. We shall not change. This is just the cost of freedom. None of that sat right with me. Not just the tragedies we were talking about, but the idea that what you believed couldn't be adjusted, couldn't be changed when you started to feel in your soul that it no longer aligned with who you are. They wouldn't change. But the other friends in my life were open to that change. And again, we're open to me changing. We're going back to these conversations about the mass shootings. The friends around me were absolutely appalled that I would consider changing, appalled that I would even question some of the things we believed in. No, we must defend the right to bear arms. Again, in general, I'm okay with that. But we're not going to have a conversation about what's going on, not just the position overall, but maybe how we can stop some of these things from happening. And if it's a mental health issue, like you keep saying it is, then what are we doing about the mental health issue? Why is this happening less in other countries? Do mental health problems stop at the American borders? Do you not want to have a conversation about this? And they didn't. But the other people around me did. They'd share their opinions. They'd explain what they believed. And it started to make more sense to me. It started to align with who I am. They allowed me to grow. So when you're having those conversations, James, with those people in your life that you truly feel that you don't want to win, you don't want to defeat them, you want them to go with you. I think that's what this is about. Is that the goal? Do we want to go to the ballot box and put in politicians as imperfect as they are? And trust me, they are. But do we want to put the ones in place that align with our hearts? If we want that, how do we get that? I do believe to get there, you can have these small moments where you can truly allow people to go with you on the change journey. Allow people to maybe understand your points or understand what you believe in or understand what the people out there in the world stand for. Case in point, I was raised to absolutely hate the idea, the word, and the concept of socialism. Not just because I was American, not just because my boomer parents were raised in the 1950s, where in 1954 we put in God, we trust on our money because we're not like those heathen communists. No, it wasn't just because of that. It was because of my family story. My grandparents were kicked out of the USSR post-World War II. My grandparents had to flee and chase a better life here in America. Then they got here in the 1950s, and America tried to toss them out because they were Reds, they were commies, they were socialists, they were of the devil, get out of here. But they persevered and they stayed here, and that's why I'm still here. So I was raised to think of socialism as a bad word. And now here it is. I know this is not a video making a case for socialism because I don't even think that's perfect. I don't think we have a perfect system. I do believe we all have to find ways to move it all forward together. But my point is, I was one of those folks who would be like, oh, did you just say the socialism word? Please leave. I'm not going to take you seriously. We don't do that here. End of discussion. And then something funny happened. I realized I did not know what the hell I was talking about. I realized I did not even really know what socialism was. What happened is for the first time in my life, I stopped and listened to what some of those people were trying to tell me. And I was shocked to find out that I not only agreed, I had already had those thoughts myself. I was already there. I just had never really taken the time to hear what they were saying. So James, maybe you could be someone that says, hey, here's what I believe, here's who I am, and here's what this is all about. And then to those people in your life that are open to it, and those people in your life that you're open to still having around, maybe they can go on that change journey too. And you can be there with them. And you can continue to grow alongside them. I think that's got to be one of the points of all this. There's a lot of things going on in this world that are bad, that are dangerous, that are scary. And I'm trying to find the best way forward. I'm trying to be who I want to be and who I feel I can be. So James, I don't know if that answers your question. I don't know if I made any sense. All I know is I look out in the world and I think, what's the best way forward? What is the goal? And I think the goal is to bring everyone forward on a journey of change. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you liked anything that I said here, give us a thumbs up, comment, hype the video, support the channel, all those good things. If you didn't like it, you're probably going to leave some hateful comments, and guess what? That's part of the game too. But hey, if you'd like to support more and ask a question yourself, become a YouTube channel member or go to patreon.com/KenNapzok. You'll see a post there, and you too can ask a question. So far, all these questions have been pretty serious, but don't worry. I think we're going to get to some lighter stuff too, except for the pineapple on pizza thing, because that will absolutely start a war, an actual fight in the street, tanks on the ground, boots on the ground war, and we already have enough of those, so I'll keep that one to myself. But pineapple's pretty good on pizza. Look at that blue jay. He's just stealing the peanuts right in front of me. Just stealing the peanuts. That's socialism in action. Peanuts are for everybody.